Now, I'm not a landscape photographer in the truest definition, or any definition of the word. That's not my speciality. Although labels is something I want to talk about in the coming months. The labels that we impose upon ourselves, or the labels we refuse to use because we don't consider ourselves experts. But let me get my sketchbook picture to start the show. It's a very dappled light today. The sun shines very, very strong. This is the light my friend Mally of the trees, does not like. He likes it to be a bit more scrimmed, whereas I like these pools of light, these very sharp differences between what's in the light and what's in the shadow. And I particularly like dapples. Could be a song title, Dapples in the Woods. Right. Dappled light, 1/50th. Now I'm going to have to underexpose a lot here by 3 stops actually. 4.5, ISO 160, back through the path, and there we go. A sketchbook photograph to start the show.
It's always difficult coming back to Australia, or anywhere for that instance, when you've been away for a few months, and you're living on your wits, because people back here don't really care. And I'm not saying that's a negative thing. That's just the way that people are. That's the way society is, right? So it's really up to you as the photographer to get yourself back into society. It's not society's issue to make you feel welcome again. It's up to you and how you deal with it.
The foreword.
I suppose my first thoughts after hearing that is the fact that people don't care about what you as the photographer has seen. That bothers me. I mean, I understand what my guest, the photographer Gary Ramage, is saying there, but it doesn't sit comfortably at all. And it's probably because I've invested time trying to understand the process that goes into reporting from say, war zones, and you've invested the time listening, and we've walked this learning curve together when it comes to listening to photographers like Gary Ramage speak and trying to understand their whys. When you see the pictures, those ones from the front lines of war or the edges of famine, it's completely impossible, I think, to not to stop and notice. For me, at any rate, they have gravity unlike anything else. And because I love photography and appreciate, if that's not too asinine a word, the story behind the photographers making these pictures, this question of how do you fit back into life when you've seen what humans inflict upon each other is something that fascinates me about the special men and women who tell these stories with their cameras. In their pictures, you can almost feel the heat, you can taste the dust, you can hear the silence between gunshots or the shuffle of a queue waiting for water. I've often thought, and you will no doubt have heard me steer the direction of a conversation along these lines just for a moment or two in the interview, not just about how those images were made or why, but what it does to the person who made them when coming back home. Because here's what strikes me. You can photograph something as harrowing as a mother burying her child because there's no more food, or be there at the very moment a ceasefire shatters, or be faced by the utter oddness of people running to work in their suits and smart attire, dodging bullets in something called Sniper's Alley. And then what? Fly home? And be expected just to slip back into normality? Go back into a kitchen that smells of coffee and toast? A walk around the block with a dog? Or listen to somebody whinging about a train being just 5 minutes late? How do you return to normality or normalcy after photographing the world as it breaks? Photographers like Don McCullin have spoken about this, how the war never really leaves you. McCullin once said, "I've been in situations where I've had to question my own sanity. I feel I brought back a bit of madness with me." And then there's Lindsay Addario, who's documented war and famine across continents. She talks about compartmentalizing, as if there's a mental box you pack the trauma into so you can live a version of normal life again. But I'm not sure I could do that. In fact, I'm pretty sure I couldn't do that. What about you? It's a kind of emotional detachment that you need to survive it. Or is it something else? Is it an ability to hold two truths at once? The suffering is real, but so too is the birthday party you're going to go to next week that you're organising for your kids. As you sit in Starbucks, what you saw in a part of the DMC is happening now, even as you pour the milk. And, maybe that's what the job demands, this strange, conflicted gift that photographers seem to have that work in that field, to bear witness but not be consumed, to carry it but still laugh with your children, to document what's broken and still believe somehow in fixing it. There's more to our conversation than only the part that I've so far revealed, along with the story behind the title today. But I'm not sure I truly got under the skin of utter chaos versus the quiet and micromanaged absurdities of Normalsville. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But something in Gary's straight-talking calm made me wonder if there's more left unsaid than said. You can be the judge. So today I'm going to talk with somebody who's very special, who's lived that very contrast in life, a photographer whose work has taken him into the very thick of it, where the rules of life shift. And yet he's found a way, somehow, to come home. I'm fascinated, and I hope you are too.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I got lucky. I managed to survive infantry for nearly 6 years, and then I was selected to go into the Public Affairs Corps within the Australian Army, which I didn't even know existed. I was always taught you're better to have the picture and not use it than not have it and need it. I went back for a fucking lens cap that I dropped. How stupid. I could be a bit of a to be honest with you. But in saying that, I never lost my humanity. I wanted people to know what it was like to lose someone that you loved and cared about, and someone that brought you into this world who didn't even recognize you anymore. I do it because I believe in telling stories, mate. And the only way I can tell these stories is through my photographs. And it's about getting the stories out there and giving people a voice that don't have a voice.
That's Gary Ramage, my guest on the Photo Walk show today. Alongside him, I'll be sharing some of your letters, your stories and thoughts you've sent in about life and your adventures with a camera as we walk together. It's a show shaped by you as much as the wonderful guests, which is what makes this time together each week feel so personal. I'll peek into the mailbag in a moment just to see what is coming up. But before that, I'd like to thank those who are Patreon members of our community, our extra milers, because your belief in this show, your desire to keep us walking together week after week, is the how, the why, and the survival of this podcast. Things are about to get more interesting, actually, with your extra show each week. I'll tell you more later. Thank you also to my sponsor, arthelper.ai, which helps you sell your photos online by making the posts and the mock-ups and the marketing emails for you. If you've ever thought, I'd like to sell my work, but I haven't a Scooby where to start, arthelper.ai does the tricky bits for you. And you get 30 days free with a code PHOTOWALK when you go to arthelper.ai. Right on the show today, alongside my guest, John Kenny brings into your life the new sport of shin-kicking. Kids, do not try this at home. It is reserved for proper eccentric English turnip heads who've been out in the midday sun for far too long. A wonderful letter from Tony Lorenzo, who asks, what is this imposter syndrome? He's got a pretty good way of giving it a kick in the shins. Plus a wonderful idea about how using film, 35mm film, that sort of thing, can make a daily diary of feelings for you. Andrew Gardner has a story that has nothing to do with making pictures, but that doesn't matter because I was left thinking, what the flame-grilled whopper? Are the burgers available? And Graham Harries invites you to think about urbex. Plus, this month's one-word assignment by Paul Hutson. So, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Valerie Jardin, by the way, asked me what these were the other day. Valerie Jardin, our regular guest for Teach Me Street. What are Garibaldi's, she asked. Well, I shall take some to Paris in a few weeks' time, just to answer that. Walking boots, check. Have you got spare film or an extra SD card? Check. And a Geiger counter for 1 week only. What, Neil? Where are you taking us? Let's walk. The letters The comments, the emails that you leave and you send gives our community a real uniqueness. Your thoughts about walking, creativity and photography provides a welcome respite from the noise of this world. As together during this show we put some miles under our feet and make a picture or three to remind us of where those footsteps were left. Come on, pups. Got the barking machine with me today. Oh, don't start that. He's very itchy at the moment. You got the summer itches, haven't you? Don't do that. What are you rolling in? You? The email address for the show is stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. And you can send pictures too. If you are sending them, if you can resize them to 2,500 pixels wide, not long edge, but wide, you are a star. So many inspirational thoughts today that you've sent in, and I want to start with one from it's a couple of months ago before unleashing my friend Ramo on you. This is a quick note really from our friend John Kenny, who as another regular contributor, I feel, John, you've now earned your own show moniker. Forthwith, John, you are now to be known as the publican of perfect light. Here's a medal, stick it on your camera bag and wear it proudly. Publican, by the way, because John Kenny runs a pub. And it's not one I've been to yet, John. It is on my list of places to visit. You know that. Mine's a Guinness. Thank you very much. The publican of perfect light was following up on the daft sports, in inverted commas, we photograph and have in the UK, the more eccentric variety, the ones that don't get featured on telly of a Saturday, the kind of sports invented by our ancestors who that morning in, I don't know, 1765, when they were inventing the game, were probably eating their Honey Nut Cheerios doused in strong mead. This is a good idea, I think. Let's put this one down. Oi, Neil, says John, on the back of the cheese rolling down a steep hill that you mentioned, where people break legs and collarbones and come close to meeting their makers as they chase the cheese down the hill, a customer in my pub mentioned this event. It takes place as part of the Olympic, spelled ILIMPICK. Their spelling, which are, well, they're essentially sort of Olympic-ish games in a place called the Cotswolds, which is one of the most beautiful places in England. You get all those fantastic earthy stoned, light stoned brick. Oh, it is a gorgeous place. I could walk in the Cotswolds for years and never get bored. Anyway, here's a sport that was mentioned to me in the pub, shin-kicking. Yes, you heard that correctly. Fancy a go at becoming famous for flinging yourself at somebody's shins with straw-stuffed trousers and shoes? Welcome to shin-kicking. Proof that us Brits have been politely injuring each other for sport since 1612. I cannot believe this has been played since 1612. This is a sport with roots so old, William Shakespeare could well have played this. I think photographing it would be infinitely more enjoyable than participating, though. And I think you're absolutely correct. I'll leave a link on the show page today so you can go and see this daftness for yourself. In Whitby, says John, we also have something called the planting of the penny hedge. Not quite as bloodthirsty or photogenic, but it is pretty old and odd. I had to go look this up, of course. It's not one I'd heard of. It's essentially English folk building a hedge in the sea, made of sticks, as a centuries-old penance for attacking a hermit. One thing I do want to mention is that I spied on your webpage for this some audio, an audio file, and that tugs right at my heartstrings, as you could probably imagine. It's the sound of a picture, which I love, that goes with this story. So when this hedge in the sea has been built, while the tide is just beginning to lap at the people's feet that have built it, that's when you sound a horn. I think that's when you sound a horn. It's a very old horn. And it says, job done. Can we retire to the inn for a warm pint of English ale or something like that? What does that horn sound like, Neil? Well, funny you should mention that. I seem to have one just here. Excuse me, Vicar, to use a proper quaint English phrase. That was the floorboards, not me. Anyway, the Publican of Perfect Light has it on his website. He's covered it. I shall leave a link for you to follow. I'm absolutely sure there are equally as strange, if not stranger things going on in the neighbourhood in your part of the world that you may have photographed or know about. So if you do, drop me a line, stories@photowalk.show. Right, my first visit, or our first visit, it's you and I together on this walk after all, to a conversation this week with Gary Ramage. Now, I met with Gary quite a few years ago when he visited my good friend Giles Penfound. You know Giles? Yes, what, he of the greasy saucepan fry-ups where you talk about photography? Yes, the very same. Gary is one of Australia's most experienced photojournalists. His career spans over 30 years. I think we might have worked out, I'm trying to remember now in our conversation, whether it was tipping closer to the number 4 in that sentence. He's been on assignments in places that many people wouldn't choose to go to, such as Somalia, East Timor, Iraq, the sketchier places of Iraq, because I've heard of late that photographers are actually going to Iraq, spending their time in some of the most wonderfully historic places. And more recently, his self-funded work in Ukraine, which we'll have a chat about. He spent many years in the military, as you're about to find out. He was a photographer in the military prior to donning the Civvy Street photographer's jacket. And he's been the official war photographer for the Australian War Memorial, and his photographs are held in many national collections. Now, he is as you're about to find out, straight-talking, much experienced photographer who believes in humanity. Here's the first part of my conversation with Gary Ramage. Gary, I'm never sure whether to call you Gary or Ramo, because I think all Australians have earned the moniker to have an O at the end of their name, haven't they?
It's correct, yeah. Everything's got an O at the end of it for a nickname, mate.
Is it something you get at birth? Do you get another passport with the O on it as well, or?
No, maybe we should, though. Maybe we should. That'd be great.
You were working in a fiberglass factory with veterans from the Vietnam War. Every day at tea break, you'd find yourself sat down, this is in your early life, with them talking about war. This obviously had a profound effect on you, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I think I was 17 or 18. I dropped out of school and I'd managed to get a job in a fiberglass factory over in Perth in West Australia, where Mum and Dad had moved us to. And yeah, the two guys that I was working with, I can't remember their names now. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just listened to their stories from Vietnam when they served in the Australian Army, and obviously something clicked because I joined up. Like Mum and Dad sort of gave me the thumbs up to join the army, and off I went. I was about to ask actually, what did Mum and Dad say? Because I think it takes a certain person to join the dots between getting your war on figuratively, because you'd heard them, dare I say, romanticising about it even when you were in tea breaks with them, and actually doing it, actually being there in a uniform and training for something that I don't know whether you hope as somebody who joins the army that you'll never get to go to the theatre of war. Yeah, I think we're talking 35 years, nearly 40 years ago now. I don't think I ever had the intention of going to war. I was quite naive. I think like all young boys were, seeking a sense of adventure. But I got lucky. I managed to survive infantry for nearly 6 years, and then I was selected to go into the Public Affairs Corps within the Australian Army, which I didn't even know existed. Spent the next sort of 18 years of my life in and out of places with them. So it's a very similar background. We met through Giles, our good buddy Penfound. Yes, and he did. He's a great guy. And he also, it's a very similar story to yours. He joined the infantry, and then he found himself working in the photographic, whatever the division is called, but he worked in photography. Yeah. So it's the same thing as you did. It's exactly the same path that we took. And we never knew each other until we met back in 96 or 97, I think, when he came to Australia on exchange when he was with the British Army, and I was still serving in the Australian Army. And we hit it off. But yeah, we followed the same career path. Both of us went into infantry, and then both of us went into the photographic services. In my case, it was the public relations service within the Australian Army. And we both more shadow each other and to the weary heights of warrant officer.
Public relations photographer in the Army sounds like an oxymoron in some ways, doesn't it?
Indeed. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Back in my day, it was all about selling a positive image for the Australian Army. Yeah, and it's propaganda when you take all the gleam off it. It's making the Army look good. And that's what we did, photographically.
Giles talks of when he made a photograph of a soldier who was sitting, I think, next to a Centurion tank, and he was cleaning his boots. You probably know the image, actually. And we've talked about the picture on the show before, and he got in a lot of trouble for that, because if you're taking PR photographs and you show a soldier on the floor tending to their boots and they've got thumping great holes in them, that's not great PR, is it?
No, it's a bit of a negative sort of image that they wouldn't want being released into the public, because all sorts of connotations about supply chains and whatever else.
So how did it work for you? Because I know Giles struggled with that. I know there were situations where he thought whether the authenticity, the realism of telling a story, and then it becoming a public relations picture, they're two entirely different.
Yeah, that is the issue that it is hard to juggle sometimes, because at the end of the day, we're part of a strategic tool for the military. We signed the dotted line, and as bad as it sounds, our job was to promote the Army in a positive light. I mean, both of us got lots of images that we've taken in our 20-year careers where pictures were not allowed to see the light of day because they were viewed by people in suits back in the capital that it wasn't the right image that we were trying to tell, even though we disagreed with it. But at the end of the day, we wore the uniform, we had to do as we were told.
Somalia was your first deployment. Was that as a photographer, as a deployment, or as an infantryman?
No. So that was my first overseas assignment as a photographer for the Australian Army. Okay. So I was a young corporal photographer, I think 24 years of age, and it was the first time the Australian Army had deployed since the Vietnam War. So it was a big deal back there. I mean, that's 32 years ago now, and it was a massive eye opener for me and for everyone else that served there. We were in a place called Baidoa, which was outside of the main capital of Mogadishu.
Yeah.
And I got into Mogadishu a couple of times and managed to sort of get out on the streets. But in some places it was like what you see in the movies. The locals would be out burning tires and putting roadblocks up and everything else. The main reason we were there was to stop the warlords taking all the food because of the famine. I mean, that's why we went in, because the hundreds of thousands of people and women and children that were dying because of lack of food. And that was the sort of the catalyst for us to deploy. But photographically, as a young photographer, my God, everywhere you looked, there was a picture. As horrible as it was a great baptism of fire for me as a young photographer. And it more or less set me on a path for the next 30 years of my life.
Losing a colleague, Lance Corporal Shannon McElhaney, really hit home. And that was perhaps the first time. I saw you speaking in an interview, and you said that probably the first time you ever put your camera down.
Yeah. So Shannon was on a patrol one night, and he was accidentally shot and later died. Part of my way that I photograph things and people and stuff, I like to get to know them first. So I got to know the doctors and the nurses because we deployed with a field hospital, and I got to know them quite well. We go into town and we did lots of work with them. And so when something bad happened, when Shannon got shot, they rang me and I raced down to the hospital, but no one knew what actually happened. So I had the Betacam all set up in the operating theatre, and then we heard the APCs, which is an armoured personnel carrier for your listeners who don't know what that is, roll in, and then all the yelling and all the screaming and everything. And then, we realized it was one of our own. And when they brought Shannon in, obviously they were trying to fix him. So I had my camera there, and I just turned it off and took it off the tripod and just sat there in sort of disbelief of what I was seeing.
I think you said you had a bit of regret that you missed those moments.
I don't know if it was regret, because it actually, again, set me on a path. I don't think anybody would want to see a young man in his last moments.
No.
Even if I had shot a picture or shot those videos, it would never have seen the light of day. And it wouldn't have helped anyone back home, I don't think. Moving forward 25, 30 years, I've been in those situations again, and I have recorded those events.
What was the difference?
I think the difference was I wasn't in uniform anymore. even though I still had a bit of a raw sort of feeling towards what was going on, I still thought it was more or less my, I guess, duty to record the event. I was always taught you're better to have the picture and not use it than not have it and need it.
Apologies to anybody who's squeamish about what I'm about to say, but I always think when I look at the sort of photographs that you were taking and still take as a photojournalist, it's often what you don't see that's more disturbing than what you do see, and suggestive detail within a photograph where you think, oh, that means X happened. I remember seeing a helicopter picture of yours, and the crew were all busy. You didn't see any people in any pain. It looked like an evacuation helicopter. But what you do see is the blood on the floor in front of you.
Yeah, so that was after. So I did quite a few embeds with the American dust-off crews in Afghanistan in 2010, 2011. And I was lucky enough that, those guys and girls let me accompany them on their rescue missions. So these guys are in Black Hawk helicopters. The only weapons they have are their own personal weapons. They're pretty well unarmed. There's no machine guns and stuff on these helicopters because they're a hospital helicopter. They're the Kazovacs. And I think I flew about 47 or 48 missions with them. And there was a couple of missions where we encountered, fighting and picking up soldiers that had been killed, soldiers that had been wounded. And that particular picture you're talking about was a young man, a Marine, who was shot and killed. He was shot through the chest, and his comrades, they were racing him to the helicopter. And I've got a whole series of pictures of them bringing him to the helicopter, getting on the helicopter, and then me getting myself into a position where I could photograph it in such a way that I thought I was trying to be as respectful as I could be to the young boy on the floor, because at the time I didn't know he was dead. I just assumed that he was in a really bad way. But when they brought him on, there were certain things about his clothing and stuff that I didn't think was appropriate that should be seen. I didn't want his parents seeing that image and being the last image they saw of their dying son. So I would position myself in such a way with the camera that I could photograph the event in such a way that I still did my job. I still told the story, but the pictures that we released, even though it was horrible and it was gruesome, it wasn't as undignified as it could have been.
The crews that you were flying with, is it true that they had practically 15 minutes? They worked on a 15 minutes clock, in, done, out, before anything more dangerous could happen? That's
right. So they had like a window where they could get to a patient and get them back to save lives. Every time I flew with them, they did it. The pilots were amazing. The flight crew guys on board, the loadies, they were just some of the bravest people I've ever had the privilege of working with.
Do you ever down tools and get involved yourself? I've spoken to a few conflict photographers of late who've said, if I'm needed, I will.
Yeah. So there was a specific incident once when I was flying with Dust Off, and Adam Montfon was the crew chief on board, and we flew into a hot LZ, which means there was Americans and Taliban were actually engaging each other with bullets. And as we were flying in, that the call came. I was really lucky. They let me plug into their systems, their comm systems on the helicopter. So I was actually recording everything they were saying on the video camera when we were flying into the LZ. I could hear it come over the headphones that the patient was crashing. I heard Adam screaming at the pilot saying, get the fucking chopper on the ground, man. We got to save this guy. Yeah. And it was fairly intense stuff. And then when we came in hot, the doors flew back. Adam jumped out and more or less ran into the shit fight, and was then directing the Marines who were struggling under the weight of their comrade to get into the helicopter. And they got him onto the helo, and we were gone within 15 minutes. Wow. We worked, when I say we, the boys worked him pretty heavily, and Adam just looked up at me, and I could see he was having issues because they were trying to resuscitate him. So I put the cameras down and I helped with the resuscitation.
And Gary Ramage is back shortly. Our mailbag is so full of wonderful special letters. Thank you so much for sending them in, although I do remember this project being being so special, the one I'm about to mention, that a few Christmases ago, it became the special edition for the end of the year. In the final photo walk of 2023, Tony Lorenzo, remember Tone? Told the remarkable story of finding two fading 1930s photographs in a shop in London. I'm pretty sure it was Brixton. And it led to a nationwide search that he had to piece together the story of the mystery girl in the 1930s photographs. It was an incredible piece of detective work. And it's, I know you shouldn't have favourites, but it does remain one of my favourite stories since starting to record the show. There was a lot of stuff going on around that story internationally. And the fact that Tony lives just north of where I am, it was too good an opportunity to let up. I went to talk with him in person anyway. Some thoughts here about how your photographs, your pictures, are really a window, if not to the soul, because I know for a lot of people that's a bit woo-woo, but a window to your feelings on any given day. Hola, Neil. How are you doing, says Tone. I've been telling myself constantly to send you a letter, but life's been a bit of a roller coaster since the end of 2024. A truly non-stop journey. I won a national award in Spain in November, obviously for your work about the project we were just talking about, I'm sure. And since then, there's been speeches, workshops and exhibitions. I'm usually very shy about sharing achievements. The curator of my next exhibition introduced me to the term imposter syndrome. That was kind of him or her. That constant feeling of embarrassment about sharing successes. It's always been a part of me, driven by the thought, the real professionals are going to laugh at you, Tony. Keep it low, you're no one. In the world of photography, says Tony, it is easy, too easy to fall into this mindset. To be honest, though, I think the best help you can give yourself at these times, he says, is to remember that photography is this wonderful universal language. People will always find a piece of you in whatever you choose to share and photograph. No one can access that feeling you had unless you share it. You are original. And Tony, right now, I want to punch the air and say, how can anybody possibly have imposter syndrome when they listen to those thoughts? Yes, you are. You're original. You're not an imposter. You're you. Yesterday, says Tone, I was walking my dog Mina through the woods. God, it's hot these days. Yes, it is. I'm not moaning. And listening to the photo walk show, there was a letter about how inspiration is sometimes hard to find. Oddly, since I began this journey of exhibitions and festivals and editing, I haven't been able to photograph freely. Taking a picture's often felt like, no, you've got too many to manage already. This doesn't fit into this and that project. Well, here's my advice on that. Use film cameras. Literally, says Tony, any kind of point-and-shoot camera. Keep it with you at all times. And just like we used to, take a photo when you need to preserve a moment. When there are no words to describe how you feel, let the image capture it. Those photos will become a visual journey of your emotions. And because you won't be able to see them until you develop them, they'll also give you time to reflect. What a fantastic idea. Usually, he says, it's a dream to develop a film and find more than 2 pictures I actually like. But in the film I shot in the last 2 weeks, 15 out of 24 may be happy to see. And yes, there were some, oh dear, that day you didn't look so happy with the world photographs within that collection. Perhaps your pictures really are a way to show how you feel day to day. I'm attaching a few pictures from my latest roll of film. They actually gave me the idea for my next project. Visual entries for the last 2 weeks, a film journal, if you will. Tony, you are like an ideas machine. You truly are. Keep shooting, keep using your language. Thank you for the company as I walk Mina in the woods, your friend, Tony Lorenzo. Tone, first up, thank you for the letter. It sounds like it's been a whirlwind over the past couple of years, but that's what happens when you find an idea like you did, which illuminates everybody with, their light bulbs of, what a great idea, as I did when I read your original letter about that story of finding the picture of the young lady from 1930 in that black and white photograph in a London shop. It was real sliding doors moments, wasn't it? If I'm reading correctly between the lines, this process that you've suggested of using film, the cathartic patient process, no less, of using it, can reveal a diary of your emotional life. And it's only when you look back at them that you find you've processed not just the pictures, but your feelings and your emotions on the day that you shot them. I think it's a glorious idea. Yes, I do. I shall put some of the pictures you sent in on the show page. And yes, I will link to that additional extraordinary story you told me in episode, or what was the number? I didn't note the number down. It was the one it was the one at the end of 23 becoming 2024. I'll link to it on the show page. Note to self, fill in your notes properly. Tony, you are a star. You really are. In every sense of the word. Some cracking thoughts and ideas there. I'll remind you of the one-word assignment in a moment. First up, absolutely made up by the fact that we're supported by arthelper.ai at the moment. And if you're not sure of how they might fit into your photography, let my studio self explain.
If you've ever thought about selling your photography online but haven't a clue where to start, I think Art Helper could probably help you because it's made for people like us. Here's how it works. You upload a photo, magically and instantly professional content is made for you, such as social media posts, email newsletters, even full Substack articles, all in your own voice. It can also generate hundreds of mock-ups for every image you upload, things like your work framed, so people get a real understanding of what your photograph could look like on their wall. It helps you connect with the right buyers and even suggests pricing based on your market. And unlike most AI tools, it has an art protection guarantee, which means something very important: your images are never used for AI training. Free to try, and Art Helper is giving our listeners a special deal. Go to arthelper.ai, use the code PHOTOWALK and get 30 days free of the pro version. I'll make sure to put a link on the show page, but also now there's a video that my friend Brandon at Art Helper made to help us understand and be able to see how the thing works. So if you go to the show page, you'll see Brandon explaining and showing exactly how this could work for you and I. It's a great way to start selling your art or growing the business you already have. And thank you, arthelper.ai, for your belief in this show.
It's the Photo Walk show of a Friday. Me with my camera, you with your camera, letters as well. I tell you what, it's so hot at the moment. It's been over the last few days in particular in the UK. I know Pups, hot, isn't it? He's already found a place in the shade, our Pups, to lie down with a stick he's found. That is a stick. If I had a jingle, that would be Stick of the Day. Oh, there's the Pinstriped Express in the background. Oh, don't walk off. I was about to make a nice picture of you. He's gone. That's it. Portrait moment gone, is it? You got to be faster than that. Yeah, obviously. The one-word assignment now. Here comes your challenge for this month. I'll tell you how you can take part in a moment. And also, I'd like to have a quick chat, which you'll be privy to, with Graham Harries. A 5-minute-ish, 5-minute focus. I like that because it alliterates, so that's fine. A 5-minute focus, if you will, on the picture that he has sent in for this month's challenge.
The Photo Walk assignment.
Paul, an assignment, a challenge for this month. What is the one word going to be?
The word is relic.
How old is a relic? Can a relic be 5,
it can
10,
be any
15?
age, because according to the Oxford Dictionary,
Right.
a relic is an object surviving from an earlier time, especially one of historical interest, or a thing or object that is now outmoded. These things are all around us. They're spread in every village, every town in the countryside. So go out and try and look, use one's eyes to see through all the modern paraphernalia and clutter and find a true relic and photograph it in an interesting way. There must be relics everywhere.
Yeah.
They sometimes take some seeking out. They're buried in undergrowth, they're hidden away behind buildings, but there's so many around, and many with a fantastic history. And what is an extra interest, if you Google these things or go to the library and check them out, there's a whole history written about them that's been submerged and buried and people don't know about. So that's an extra dimension to the enjoyment from doing something like that.
Wonderful. So the word again is
relic.
Send your photographs, your challenge pictures to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide. If you can resize them, that really helps with the work on the show page or the assignments page. And also, if you can leave out any watermarks or borders, but do make sure that you. I know, pups. I'm telling them. I'm telling them. Please, that you send in your links to Instagram, to Glass. Yeah. Any others? That one. YouTube. Websites would be more appropriate, but I suppose YouTube as well. Send those links in and I'll put them next to your picture on the assignments page, stories@photowalk.show, the email address. So I mentioned Graham Harries a moment ago. He is a photographer in Wales who's been working on a project called Lost Wales, which means that in terms of relics, this is perfectly in his wheelhouse. Obviously, a wheelhouse with rusty wheel and a ship's horn that no longer works. And I do love a good story about lost stuff, the relics, and which is why I was so delighted when Paul made it this month's assignment. The relics and the once loved, forgotten things of history that we find along our photo walk paths. So I took a moment upon seeing this picture of a rusty old tractor and knowing about Graham's Lost Wales to reach out about the picture he'd made for, well, I don't think he'd made this one for the challenge, but it certainly fits into the challenge, if we're being entirely honest. It's a picture of a rusting relic and a few others that he's seen since getting into urban exploration.
Your email landed at the perfect time because I was sat here chombling on a sandwich, and in came your relics mail to take part in the assignment. And it was an old tractor, proper beaten up old tractor. And that's your relic photo to answer the assignment, which is perfect. Where did you find the tractor?
It's something I stumbled across, basically. I've seen one photograph of it, and there was a clue in the narrative of where it was, because a lot of people like myself never give locations away.
Oh, yes.
Because we don't trust many people. See.
Yeah.
I sort of reverse engineered it, and I hunted it down. And bizarrely enough, like many of the places that I've visited, they're literally hidden. It was hidden behind a hedgerow, hidden in plain sight, as the saying goes.
Yeah. I found a place in the woods. It's a few years back now, actually, and I remember taking a picture of Barney in his early days, and he was. It was this really weird hut that I found that obviously nobody had been in for years. I didn't dare approach it because, of course, my stupid imagination starts thinking the witches of Eastwick are in there or something like that, waiting with a cauldron for me. But it was a great find. It's interesting that you say that about protecting the places that you photograph, because I want to talk about Lost Wales, which is available on your Insta. I'll do an Instagram link to it. I would imagine some of those places then you try to keep secret as well. Are you worried that people are going to trample them and just leave stuff and just...
I'll be honest with you, Neil. I've been doing this now. I started my Lost Wales project around 2005, I think it was. I was approached by a rock band looking for a location for a photo shoot. And a lot of these places are... they're one-offs. They may not necessarily be historical importance, but they've got a certain magic. And when the local guys come along with their pots of paint and start creating their art, which is fine. I understand, I appreciate that in time and place. But then once that gets out, then especially with social media these days, you put something on there and guaranteed it's going to be lost.
It's interesting because I've spoken with a few urbex photographers now across the years, and they've all said very much the same thing as you, Graham, that it would be lovely to share it, but we don't want to spoil it. And the magic is in the photographs that you can show to other people. But as you say, hidden in plain sight, there's one on your Insta, just off a busy main road. So this is a drone shot. Disused, converted slate quarry that during the dark days of the Second World War was used as a store for munitions. Yeah. But if you look at it, if you were coming round that road, just taking that bend gently to the left, you wouldn't see it.
And I do you know what? I that was exactly, until I found out where it was, I'd been on that road a number of times and I would never had a clue.
Yeah.
Would never had a clue.
Some of them are harder to get to. And I'm interested in this one because I remember doing a wedding on a sea fort. It's one of my fondest memories. One of my fondest memory weddings is being on this sea fort out in the Solent. So it's one of 3 forts that they have there. This one is called Spitbank. And it was used it was built during the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah, the Palmerston forts.
Yeah. I didn't realise that. I thought they had to be sea defences for World War I or World War II or something like that.
Go back. And bizarrely enough, they were built for the Napoleonic Wars and the Napoleonic period, but they were never used in anger.
No. I know, and there was a wry sense of humour, and I hope our French listeners will accept this with the grace that it's meant. When I learned that the water that they were, is it called tapping? The water table which they were drawing the fresh water from for the soldiers that were posted to drink from was actually all the way from France.
You couldn't make it up.
I thought that was a lovely part of the story. You've got one. It's built to defend against the invasion that never came. Which castle is that? Which sea fort is that one?
No, I've got photos of 3 of them actually. 2 of which are on dry land, and the third, which I'm assuming you're referring to, is surrounded by waters. That's Stackrock Fort. Stackrock Fort sits out in the middle of Milford Sound, in the shadows of the oil refineries.
Right.
And I was lucky to be invited by a couple of friends of mine to go along and on a trip with the first photographers to set foot on the island for many years, and we stayed there. We had to stay there basically because the problem you've got is because Milford Sound is a tidal waterway. You land the boat at high tide, the tide drops and it goes down about 15 foot. So no other boat can land until the tide comes back in again. So you are literally out there for a good 12 hours.
Did you go right down into the very depths of it? So now the Spitbank one has an outer wall and an inner wall, and that goes right. I think there's quite a lot of it that's below sea level. And they send the newbies there to walk around it in the dark as a kind of some sort of horrible test.
Well, with Stackrock, it is actually built on a rocky outcrop in the middle of the waterway, so you can only go down so far because you're literally on bedrock there.
Yes, yeah. Do you feel a bit spooked when you go to these places? There's some of the pictures on your Instagram where I'm thinking, I would not be walking in there if Barney was 8 times the size that he is now.
Oh yes. It is. I'll be honest with you. There's 2 things there. First of all, yes, I have felt a bit spooked, but it's also being sensible for once, if I may. I mean, you don't go to a lot of these places where they've been empty for 40, 50, 60 years. You know, the floors are made of timber. And you one slip and you go through the floor and you've got a broken leg and nobody knows where you are. Yeah. You don't go on your own. Luckily, it's not happened to me. It's come close, but it's not happened to me. So I do go with 2 very good friends, Gary and Steve Lydiard, and we've all got the common interest and we all bounce off each other as well. But it's also good that we keep an eye on each other.
My thanks to Graham, and I will, of course, leave links to his work on the show page. Pups, come out of there. I do get worried this time of year with the adders. Come on. I know our snakes are certainly not as potent as... come on, pups, out of there. There's nettles as well. What are you doing? There's snakes in other countries, but come on, this way. You can... I think he's teasing me. Come on. Where were we? Yes, I'll leave some links to Graham's work on the show page today. And, well, if you've been doing some urban exploration, because Graham started this, then I'd like to see your urban exploration. I remember photographing the old silos, the missile silos at Greenham Common that still stand today. They were used in the Star Wars, one of the Star Wars films. I forget all the names. I was going to say variants of them, but I can't bring myself to say the word variant. It fits into the same category as the word pivot from that particular time in our history, not so long ago. But anyway, yes, I got into... They're closed off now. You get nowhere close to them. But to get inside them was both fascinating and a little bit disturbing, if I were to be honest. Totally on your own in these silos that once held these mass weapons of war. Horrible, 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 horrible. But very interesting black and white photographs when I was making some pictures for a course I was on. So yes, if you've made some pictures, some urban exploration, some urbex pictures, I'd love to hear from you. Stories at photowalk.show. Right, let's return to my conversation with Gary Ramage, and we start with a Mutual Appreciation Society meeting for my good friend, oft guest of this show, Giles Penfound, the former army photographer, whose work and archive is held in places such as the Imperial War Museum in London. Here's the next part of my conversation as I duck under the trees here. This bit of path along the walk with Gary Ramage, or Ramo.
I'm very fortunate to know Giles. I know you know him as a friend, and he's become a dear friend of yours. And you've been in situations with him that I can't even imagine. And
Did he tell you about that pub crawl?
Well, the pub crawl, no. And so this is the thing. The separation that you need between... Because I've heard both of you talking, and there's I don't know whether it's something that you deploy to hold on to any form of sanity. This dark humour, this black humour that exists, that gets you through the day to day. I'm a photographer, but I'm not a photographer in the respect or the way that you are, and I can't imagine how you put one thing down and go back to a normal life.
It is difficult, and the first couple of trips I did to Afghanistan, I struggled when I got back. Like my wife Alison, I remember I came back in 2010 for a friend's wedding, and I met him and his brand new wife to be in a restaurant, and I'd more or less just got off a plane from Afghanistan, and the first thing out of my mouth was F this and F that, and we're in a restaurant, and my wife was kicking me under the table because I hadn't actually processed where I actually was. That I was home and I was safe and whatever else. So it took me a long while to get used to that, to switch on, switch off. I mean, I went out there for nearly 15 years on and off. So I got used to it very quickly. And I learned how to, on most occasions, I learned how to balance my home life with the life of trying to be a photographer in a war zone.
Glad you mentioned Alison. Because I've got your book here. Look, here it is.
Look at that.
One shot. I've had your book for quite a while, actually. I've read it.
What do you think?
Well, it nearly went to Oxfam, but I held on to it.
No, you're a good man.
It's in all seriousness, because I know a few photographers now that have worked in these extreme situations that you describe within your book. It is something else to be able to read what feels like it's a diary in many, many respects.
Yeah, it is.
You did mention Alison, and I bookmarked a page with Alison here, where you thank the woman you love more than life, your beautiful wife, Alison. Without her encouragement, understanding, love, guidance, and constant spelling corrections, I would not be where I am now. But this is the interesting bit. She has tolerated my short notice assignments and endured the loneliness when I spent months away. We often forget the people that are left in what you might call Normalsville when you're off doing all these just incredulous things.
Yeah. And, I meant everything I said in that book. I'm very lucky to have a very tolerant wife. I mean, my wife is a journalist. She's an ex-BBC journo. She's now at the ABC here in Canberra. She has put up with a lot in, sort of 18, 19 years we've been together now. But, that's one of the great things of being a couple. We sort of get each other. We don't try to crowd each other. She's always encouraged me to go off and do what I want to do. And I'm very lucky and very fortunate to have a partner that, understands that.
Do you think if she hadn't been a journalist, she wouldn't be quite so understanding?
Yeah, it definitely helps having someone in the sort of same industry that understands the short notice, running off to wherever.
How do you decompress? What do you talk about?
Now that I'm a lot older and a lot more sort of sensible.
The word sensible, by the way, isn't necessarily a word I would apply to you, which we'll come to.
I'm going to get myself in trouble here. So one anecdote, 2009, the Australian government decided to send a trial embed to Afghanistan. So myself, my very good friend Ian McPhedran, who was one of the senior journalists at News, and Sally from ABC were chosen to do this embed. We got in a bit of trouble out there, and there was a couple of rockets that came very close to us. I didn't tell my wife about it. I forgot that she worked with Sally at the ABC, and Sally put it out on the evening news. And then when I rang Ali, I'm like, "Hi, how you going? Everything's great. Nothing going on. Nothing to talk about." And she's like, "Really? You don't want to tell me about what Sally reported on?" And I've just gone, "Oh, shit."
Yeah.
So ever since then, I tell her everything, mate, for good or for bad.
I can't remember whether it's the book or maybe a film that I watched, but it is an unusual story. Tell me about the day you almost lost your life because you went back to collect a lens cap that you dropped. Now, all photographers are familiar with leaving lens caps in places. So this is probably why, with my dark sense of humour, because I have one too, that it was triggered, if that's the right word, by a lens cap story, but in the most extreme of situations. Yeah,
it just goes to show that, my Scottish heritage and my short arms and long pockets have come back to haunt me, mate, because, I went back for a fucking lens cap that I dropped. How stupid. So, I was on exchange with the British Army in Kosovo, and, I was wearing my Australian camouflage uniform at the time, and it was probably pretty stupid because no one had actually realised that it was the same as what I think it was the Serbian forces uniform were using. And I was sort of walking back down. I found the lens cap, by the way. Thank you very much.
I know you did. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm pleased you did. After that,
but then I was walking back down the alleyway, very very proud of myself and all cheerful, and then I heard the distinctive sound of machine gun cocking. And when you hear that sound, you sort of stop in your paces. And I looked up and I saw this young British soldier who'd taken a beat on me with his machine gun because he thought I was a Serb soldier. Yeah, and I was like, "Hello, no, Australian, kangaroo, all that type of stuff." So that was an interesting day, And the same day, actually, a couple of hours later, I got surrounded by a whole bunch of very angry Kosovo residents who again thought I was a Serbian soldier. Yeah. So after that, the commander actually let me put on a British uniform with Australian flags on my shoulder. So when I did sort of speak, people didn't look at me really funny.
No, it's an extraordinary story, which you tell in a very light-hearted manner. But
I'm a very light-hearted man.
Well, the fact that you just shouted out Australia and kangaroo isn't really the whole story. It could have ended. You might not have had the opportunity to even shout those words, from what I've read.
No. I was sort of lucky that obviously he'd read his ROEs and didn't just engage me. Yeah. Because I was quite easily would have been killed.
What takes you back to? Because eventually you left the army, but you didn't leave these places.
No, I think the hook was put in after Somalia. And I guess, you've spoken to a lot of guys that have covered conflict.
Yeah.
I think once it gets into your system, it's very, very hard to get out. And, I don't do drugs. I've never done really, hard drugs, so I don't know what that addiction is like, but that's what it felt like. It felt like some sort of addiction where I just couldn't get enough of it. I wanted to be, every time something kicked off, I wanted to be there. So when I left the army, well, I eventually got a job with news in Australia. And again, I turned up and the Indonesian tsunami had kicked off over Christmas. And I was the guy on the ground at the paper in Sydney with a passport in his backpack. And I got told, get to the airport, go. That was it. That just sent me on the path of 20 years of covering major news assignments around the globe at a minute's notice.
I know you've always been very respectful. I know this of you, that you've never used the fact that you were a warrant officer and you were in the army. You've never used that as a kind of a passport to let me in here. I might be pressed, but I'm one of you guys. You're a very down to earth bloke, and it's a very Australian thing to say. I know, but no,
it is. I mean, all the embeds that I have done, and it's a lot. I never went in there and said, "Hey guys, Warrant Officer Gary Ramage, I did 20 years in the army in 6RA, blah blah." I've never done that. Most of the guys know my reputation from other service personnel, that have said, Ramo's coming out, he used to be one of us, whatever, he's okay. But normally I like to do extended embeds so that the guys the guys and the girls get to know me. And that way I find it gives me better access to the photography to make better pictures, because I'm not coming in with, 5 or 6 days and running around and they're like, media press, blah, blah, blah. Because I was actually doing the same thing as they were doing, I was out there sleeping with them, I was doing patrols, whatever else. And that gave me a little bit of respect from the soldiers, who would then give me a little bit more leadway to do things that I wanted to try and do to tell their story.
Well, is that extraordinary? It's a picture, I think, in your book, actually, of talking of discomfort, where you're in, I think it's Afghanistan, where you've got a picture of one of the American soldiers cuddling into the dog that he has.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I think it was a bomb sniffing dog or something.
Yeah, EOD. Yeah. So that was when I was embedded with the 3-6 Marines in Marja in Helmand Province.
Right.
We're on a 3-day patrol, and I woke up really early one morning, and that was the first thing I saw, and I was fascinated. It's the only picture from all of my years in Afghanistan I have on my wall. It goes down as one of my favourite pictures. Probably because it was in such a shithole, but it's such a beautiful picture of a boy and his dog.
Yeah.
And like you forget about everything else, and it's just the love between this animal and this boy. And he was a boy. He was 21 years old at the time. And, he was carrying all of his gear plus all of the gear for the dog, food, the water, and everything else. Yeah. And it was just a lovely bonded moment.
It's an extraordinary story. I hope you'll allow us to show it on the show page.
Feel your boots.
I'd love to show that. I'm intrigued. When you'd left the army, and now you're dealing with Civvy Street people, and I don't know. You'd already talked about the restaurant, and there's this understanding that people in Civvy Street don't have when you walk in and you've just spent a few months in an absolute hellhole, and then you're supposed to get back to ordering a scampi starter or something. How you can sort of get back into normal life is difficult. And I wonder how it was like working with Civvy Street news editors and picture editors who've never been in these places, bar the pictures they've seen.
Yeah, I was really lucky. So Andrew Darby was my picture editor at the Telegraph in Sydney, and he was a great guy. He's the one that would push me to go off to these places and get great pictures. So I had his backing for everything. So in that regard, I was lucky. It's always difficult coming back to Australia or anywhere for that instance when you've been away for a few months, and you're living on your wits, because people back here don't really care. And I'm not saying that's a negative thing. That's just the way that people are. That's the way society is, right? So it's really up to you as the photographer to get yourself back into society. It's not society's issue to make you feel welcome again. It's up to you and how you deal with it, and like we were talking about before, the best way to do that is to talk to someone and get it off your chest, because I know from personal experience, when you don't talk about stuff, it causes lots of problems.
Who do you talk to? Is it Alison, or are there other people as well?
Ali, or guys that I'd served with, or guy, like Matt Mackham, the journal that was there. We have very much black humor between the two of us. Yeah. But it's a survival mechanism, or a coping mechanism. And that's just, it's no different to you see the movies with cops at the murder scene, they're eating donuts, that type of thing. It's how people cope, and people cope differently with different situations.
And Gary Ramage returns shortly. It's the Friday photo walk. You with your camera, me with my camera, letters with me as well. hearing your thoughts, reading your stories, looking at the pictures that you make along the various trails that you take around the world, which I know by now I should be used to. But there's still a real thrill when I get a letter from somewhere a long, long way away from where I'm stood. I think, oh, the power of this podcasty thing, eh? I want to share with you what the mailbag at HQ actually looks like. You might think it's a well-ordered, organised machine, and sometimes, to be fair, sometimes it can be, because I've got a pretty good memory in knowing what's been written in and thinking, oh, we had a letter about that, if there's some context to perhaps something a guest may have said. Other times it's a bit more random, as you probably appreciate. Imagine a great big, figuratively this is, imagine... or metaphorically, one of the two, a great big Hessian sack with all your letters in them. And I dip my hand in before I head out for my walk and pull out some letters. So whilst I appreciate you might sometimes, if you've sent in a wonderful letter, you might think, hang on a moment, that sounds like that one was written last week. And my one was written X many weeks ago. It does sometimes, that's the way what's that expression? Not the cookie crumbles, the something falls. And I quite like that. I quite like that nature of the show and how we get to your letters. This next letter, Neil, you're setting us up for an excuse, aren't you? I might be. This next letter was sent in almost 1 year to the day ago. I don't want that to put you off sending stuff in, by the way, because it doesn't usually take this long to get to stuff. But it does prove that I really do believe in the power of letters maturing like, would it be a fine Italian cheese, Neil? It might well be. It's from Andrew Gardner, and it was worth the wait, Andrew, for this story. It's not really a photographic story either, which doesn't matter. It's a wonderful story. I love it. And in that soon I have a writer coming onto the show to talk about the power of writing. We're really going to drill down into... I suppose the styles. There might be a bit of how on that one as well as the why. And the fact that I'm going to start doing my reflections piece soon, very soon. I've been writing it, and that's going to be on the extra mile. Writing, journaling, that sort of thing is, I think it's a really important part of our creative process. As photographers too, yes, I do. And so, yeah, I thought this is a story that had me wondering where it was all going until we get to the end, when I started to worry whether we should call the authorities, actually. But you'll work it out as we go along why I was so worried. Hi, Neil, says Andrew. Hope all is well. I listened with interest to the tale of your guest, so this will be about a year ago, speaking about having access to the place where they discovered DNA and taking some sneaky pictures. I found that fascinating and have a similar tale, although without the pictures, unfortunately. You'll need to picture the scene for me. This is many years ago, 15 or 20 or so. Back in the day, my dad ran the local village British Royal Legion, where we lived. He was a major backbone of the local establishment. Anyway, close to the bar, a great uncle and one of his friends of many years were sat playing cribbage at a table with their drinks of dark ale in pint dimple jugs. Very popular in those places at the time. This is all very English, Andrew. All we need now is a flash mob of Morris dancers waving hankies, and I feel the story's complete before we've even started. I stopped by, says Andrew, that day to see how Dad was. Inevitably, he was busy at work behind the bar. He was always there. Didn't matter what side of the bar it was, you could generally find him up the club. Are we allowed to say that? I don't want to be cancelled. So I get talking to great Uncle John and his mate. Now, John is still with us, mid-90s, scaring his family rigid with his antics, as only the maturer generation can. His mate, as an apprentice chippy when he left school, was sat there blaming his poor health and chest troubles on a particular job at one of the colleges in Cambridge, possibly College. I can't remember, it was a few years ago, remember? Remember? I bleeped the name out, by the way, in case you're thinking, well, I didn't hear the name of the college. I don't know why, but just in case, you'll understand as we go through the story. They had to replace a door in one of the upstairs rooms when the chippy was younger, this is. Now, I don't know much about wood, but this is what he told us. From the top floor of the building, they had to remove a 3-inch thick oak door and frame. Blimey. It was understandably very heavy, and this poor lad had only just started working. And he made it sound like there wasn't much meat on him at the time. They then had to replace this with a 4-inch teak door and frame. So they've gone heavier, yes? Now, for a neglected room, I have to say this seemed to be a lot of trouble to go to. The chap told me that teak is denser than oak, and they had to drag it right up to the top floor. No lifts that it could fit in. It was dragged all the way. Anyway, when they were putting the final touches to the job, I don't know, polishing doorknobs or something like that, they were met by 2 blokes in hazmat suits and a funny box. Do you mean one of these? Apparently, this was the room they used to split the atom. And the room was apparently as radioactive as the fish at Sizewell nuclear power station, just off the coast. The chippies were told in no uncertain terms to get going. When they confessed to having been working solidly in the area for a week or more, the hazmat-suited blokes with full-on masks nearly had heart failure, stating they should only be in the area for a couple of hours max, even with suits on. So, a tale by 2 old boys up the club, as it were. True or not, I don't know, but I like to believe this is true. If so, we owe them our thanks. If not, it's still a fond memory of my time up the club. Would you stop saying that? By the way, I never did find out who won the game of cards. I would imagine they were green, weren't they? They were probably glowing. Have a great weekend, Andrew. I absolutely adore these sorts of stories, Andrew, I do. Some might say shaggy dog tales, but this is the stuff of legend. Talking of legend, I couldn't do this last week. It didn't seem appropriate with the news on the particular week, but with a nod of respect, of course, I'd like to issue you this week with a second invite in as many weeks to come travelling with me. This time, I'd like you to come with me to India.
I've been thinking much about my time in India this year and what's ahead for next year. As Raghu Ray said, the legendary Indian magnum photographer of India, in India life doesn't present itself in still moments. It flows, it collides, it confronts you. Be alert, but also be available. Another one of those, please, voiceover Neil. Okay, try this from a legend we often talk about, a certain Mr. Don McCullin. India is full of colours, but also full of humanity. You must go beyond the obvious. The real India lies behind the curtain, not in front of it. And you know what? I think that's what I found in India earlier this year. I see it now in the pictures I made, and I'm needing to return. My trip there, for me personally, was a reminder that life still pulses out there beyond the scroll. And I want to see it, taste it, hear it, document it. So come walk with us through Kolkata and Varanasi, 2 of India's most vivid, story-rich cities, on a photography adventure that's not about ticking boxes, but about seeing. We'll shoot morning flower markets in soft light, catch the breath of city streets as they wake, and drift along the Ganges at sunrise, while Varanasi begins to chant the day alive. It's not just about photography, it's about slowing down long enough to notice again. A creative reset, a way to travel with purpose, with people who, get it. You'll learn, you'll shoot, you'll share, and you might just find something quietly life-affirming in the process, like I did. Go to photowalk.show and hit the India 26 button in the menu at the top, which will take you to our travel company, The Journey Beyond. India 26 on photowalk.show in the menu at the top. We've kept the group small, the days thoughtful, and the doors very much open. So yes, come make those pictures with us. The kind that say more than words.
It's the photo walk of a Friday. Thank you for joining us. We're sort of closing in on the 500th edition. I wonder what we should do for that. We should do something special, you and I, shouldn't we? I don't know. Where should we go? I'm not quite sure what the 500th episode, in terms of my diary, what it collides collides with. But 500, I think that half a thousand, 500 is a number worth celebrating. So anyway, where's Pups gone? He's gone running off. I see a big pool of water. Yeah, Pups, I would join you if I could today. I honestly would. Quick, get your trunks on. How's that, Pups? Is that good? I can't come into there with you. It's no good you just standing there looking at me like I'm... Let me try and find a bit of stick to throw in. Is there any stick here? No, that's a root. I'll be digging that up till kingdom come. Oh, I'll just throw a stone in. He often thinks these are sticks. Anyway, here we go. Ready? You look utterly unimpressed. Can I walk along this way? You join me when you're ready. You cool down, Pups. Come on. Can I do a throw forward, as the radio speak goes, for my show guest next week, Thomas Nicolon. He is a Nat Geo explorer. I said that at the dinner table last night. My eldest said, "Nat Geo, are you trying to be trendy, Dad?" Yeah, Nat Geo, National Geographic. Don't you mean National Geographic? I thought, well, you're the one that usually shortens everything. Why say it long form when you can acronymise the living daylights out of it? Look at this. The path is just becoming overgrown now. That's no longer a path. That's an invite to be eaten by triffids. Hold on, let me get a picture of it. The path ahead. You'll see it. 400th shutter speed, f4.5, 160 ISO. If you see just a mass of green and you think, what's that? It's just a picture of grass. That's the path. And Pups has gone somewhere ahead. Where are you? Where are you? There you are. You finding the next pool? I know there's another pool of water just up here. Here we go. This is why these reeds feed off the stream that goes down to the pool, which is marvellous. Look at this. There's another pool. Although already all right, Pups, so little water in it. The water level's gone down. What's that over there? You get it. Go on. That's a lot of fun. You can actually walk all the way down the stream while I walk along the path. Yeah? Thanks for shaking that out on me. You're welcome. Yeah, a throw forward to Thomas Nicolon, who is a Nat Geo, I'll say that proudly, explorer. And he shares many stories, some that are wonderfully cheeky. The way he started his career, at any rate, is. You'll love that part of the story. Some of the stories are about empathy and understanding that you have to show when you photograph alongside people you really don't ethically agree with, such as hunters. That's an interesting part of the story. And some that may have, in a positive sense this is, have you recalibrating your thoughts about creativity and adventure. I feel very proud to have chatted with him. Honestly, during the weeks, I think I would if it wasn't for this show, and you being here to listen to it, I would never chat to these just fascinating people. A French Nat Geo photographer would probably not have been on my radar of conversations. So yeah, that's next week. Then in a couple of weeks, a man who walked 10,000 kilometres around the perimeter of these Isles, where I live, with a camera, of course. Quintin Lake is his name. After which I hope I shall bring you a special. It all depends if I record enough. I'm sure I will. From Paris. A photo walk workshop special under the guidance of our resident Candid Street expert, Valerie Jardin, no less. So we have some mapped out weeks for sure. And, yes, Ibarionex Pirello is going to be a guest, possibly in 4 weeks' time. I've scheduled in a conversation with him. He of the Candid Frame, a photo podcast that was one of the early adopters, really, of in the field of photo podcasts. Anyway, and we have much to talk about. The folk that he's talked with, for starters, and also will of course talk, no doubt, about losing his studio and home to the LA fires earlier on this year. He's a super photographer too. So Ibarionex Pirello will be on the show. Right, Back to Gary Ramage for our concluding part of the conversation today, although he is back on the Extra Mile with some more stories of a life behind the lens.
In your images, Gary, soldiers are often portrayed. They're not portrayed as warriors necessarily. The dog picture is a great example, actually, but as people carrying a fair degree of emotional weight. And I wondered if that was intentional from your angles.
If you talk to any soldier, they'll say war is 99% sitting on your ass bored, right? It's that 1%. So to actually get pictures of any action was quite rare, even though I did manage to get some. But that was never my focus. My focus was purely to tell the Australian soldier or the digger his story. And I guess it's going back to Charles Bean and Frank Hurley and Wilkins, all these great guys from World War I that told the soldier of the Australian soldier in the Western Front and Gallipoli. And I guess I've been trying to follow in their footsteps. The admiration that I have for these guys that did what they did more than 100 years ago, I can't say enough about them.
For anybody who feels or thinks that conflict photography is just reactionary, I think you've probably sunk that one straight away. But there are many of your pictures are extraordinary frames which have the makings of something rather more cinematic. I'm thinking primarily of those pictures where you've got the shafts of light with dust kicked up coming through windows, and you've got a soldier slightly in silhouette. These are artistic pictures. They don't always feel to me like war or conflict pictures.
No, and I mean, I don't try to go out there to make art, as they say. I mean, I'm there to capture a moment. And, yourself and other photographers know it's all about the light. And, if I'm lucky enough where I'm in a situation where the light is just perfect, I'm going to take the picture. It's a hard one to jog because I know there's a lot of debate out there about, art and war and everything else that's going on. I've never seen myself as a artist. And I don't refer to myself as a war photographer or a combat photographer. I refer to myself as a photographer. Because I was never about labels. Yeah. And I don't know why that is or what that's about, but I've never referred to myself as, hey, Gary Ramage, great war photographer. So I'd feel embarrassed, I think, referring to myself as someone in that area.
Coming back to your book.
Yes.
Which is available at all good bookshops, I'm sure, still. So I'd say that for you, Gary. If not Amazon.
Thanks, mate.
If not Amazon. Do whatever you have to do. Just get the shot. Do you live by that, or is that something that just looks good on a book jacket?
I think it was a bit of both, but no, I'm always thinking how to get a better picture. And, the people that have worked with me against me for other organizations will tell you that I don't follow the pack. I'm always looking for a different angle or whatever it is to try and get, I guess, one up on someone else, because I don't want to take the same picture as the other 100 photographers that are, there to do the same job. Yeah. I'm always looking for something different.
Yeah. So you're very competitive.
I used to be when I was working in mainstream newspapers. Yeah, I could be a bit of a prick, to be honest with you. But in saying that, I never lost my humanity. No. On my compassion.
Do you know that's really important, because I wanted to ask you in particular about this. Knowing you and Giles, and having seen Giles's pictures in particular in the Balkans conflict, the ones that have always affected me most through looking through his extraordinary back catalogue, his archive, is when he's had to work with showing how war affects children. And that for me would be the hardest thing. Perhaps doubly so now that I have children, but I think it would be the hardest thing anyway. And I wonder how that affected you, because you've done your fair share of that.
No, it did. After Somalia, I was quite screwed up for a while. Apart from the death of Shannon and the children that were dying there because of lack of food. I think I lost my shit at my nephews one night at dinner when they wouldn't finish a meal or something. It's all these anecdotal stories you hear about people coming back from war zone and going off at the kitchen table. That does happen. So, I didn't have children when I was there. I think it was probably harder for people that had kids. But, it's all about showing compassion, I think.
And humanity.
Definitely humanity, And, I say that to young photographers now, no matter how competitive you want to get, and to the young journalists as well that, we get to mentor, never, ever lose your humanity, because it's not worth it.
You mentioned a few photographers just a moment ago that have inspired you. Are there any particular photographers you think, okay, you show humanity, you have an empathy in a way that other photographers don't quite manage?
Larry Burrows is probably my biggest idol in photography. Yeah, I mean, when I was a young photographer in the Army, I used to try and replicate his images all the time. I was even stupid enough to convince a Kiwi helicopter crew to put a seatbelt around me and stick me on the skid so I could do Larry Burrows' machine gun photo out the side of the helicopter. And we just would never get away with that shit these days. No. Like the whole OH&S stuff that goes on and the things that I was able to do back in my career, the pictures that I made, I couldn't do again today.
Well, considering that then, I wonder what's changed more, the world you're photographing or the way you photograph it? What's changed about you?
Oh, I think I have changed. Well, I've definitely got a lot calmer in my older years. I'm still competitive, but not as aggressive to get the picture, if that makes sense. I mean, I work for a local newspaper, Canberra Times now, and it's all very local orientated content. So, I'm not jumping on planes and traveling to war zones or traveling for major international stories anymore. I mean, that part of my life has gone. So I'm now getting into more localized content gathering.
Although you were self-funding some of your trips, weren't you?
I was silly enough to run off to Ukraine when it kicked off back in 2022, and I was there for 2 months.
Yeah.
And that was all self-funded, and it cost me a fortune. I had to take out, I didn't have to, but I did take out war insurance, which was an absolute killer. That was many, many US dollars, and then paying for flights, paying for accommodation, food. And myself and my mate, Steve, and Stephen Dupont because you've spoken to Steve. Yeah. So Steve and I were out in Ukraine together, and we couldn't get anyone to buy any of our pictures. It was just so hard.
Why? Between the two of you, with all your experience,
people didn't, and that's the whole thing, Neil, is that I'd worked for News Corp for 18 years, and I couldn't even get them to purchase any of the pictures I was taking, and we were taking like exclusive imagery. They just weren't interested because they didn't want to pay for content. And if you look at what was going on in Ukraine, like there was tens of thousands of people there supplying pictures on Instagram, Facebook, so they were getting it for free. So and to me that was sort of the, I guess, a major learning moment for photography and where we're going, is that as sad as it is to say, it's a dying art form for us now in news media, because news outlets don't have the same money they used to have, because of loss in advertising and revenue and everything else, and they won't pay for content.
And what about newspapers on a more local scale? In my local town, we not so much lost it, but it's practically lost as a printed piece of work now.
We still have print newspapers here in Australia. Even sort of regional newspapers are still print. For how long that lasts, nobody knows. I mean, at the moment, we have a daily newspaper and weekend newspapers. My gut would probably say it'll probably go back to maybe a weekend newspaper and have content during the week for online, but I don't know.
Last time we spoke, and it was actually before COVID, I can't believe it was that long ago, sitting in that room, the three of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Having a chat. And you were talking about a story you've been working on, and I want to talk about two particularly difficult stories, but two entirely different emotional connections for reasons that will become clear. It was a picture that you made that in Australia particularly hit the headlines, showing the face through a long lens of one of the country's most despicable monsters. And I remember the lengths he went to, literally actually, in terms of focal length and patience to get that story.
Yeah, so that was the worst shooting in Australian history.
Yeah,
where we had a young boy down in Tasmania that killed, I can't remember how many people now, but it was lots. Yeah. It was the biggest massacre we'd had in our national history, and it was coming up, I think, to 20 years. And I was given the assignment to go down to Tasmania and try and get a picture of him in his maximum security prison. It was an impossible job.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, the boss thought I could have a crack at it, and I was stupid enough to go, I can do that, no worries.
Did you get it?
I did. Yeah, I was very lucky. So I was nearly a kilometre away from him on a hill. I used the sun app at the time to let me know which way the sun was going to come, and I got lucky with the sun hitting into the main, because he was in maximum security. And at 3 or 4 o'clock, I can't remember, the sun would light up the exercise yard. And we figured out that there was roughly maybe 20 odd people in that maximum security. Maybe 17 of them were all under 30. and there was two that were my age, and I thought it has to be him. And on the first day we got him, well, I thought we got him. Martin Bryant was his name, and it turned out that it wasn't him. And then we had to go back up and then again try and get him, and it turned out that it was the guy that we photographed was an old, bald, overweight man in an orange jumpsuit, and that was him. And if you Google Martin Bryant, you'll see that he was a typical Australian surfy-looking lad, long blonde, curly hair, very young, shyish. And then to see him 20 years later as this obese, middle-aged man, I would never have pegged it. But I was lucky enough to get the picture, yeah.
I certainly want to put a full stop between that story and the next one and have space, because the next story is one that you've told. You describe it as my hardest assignment, and it's a very personal assignment because it's a story about your dad and telling the story of your dad with dementia.
Yeah, it was my dad with dementia, and his struggle with it, and his final days and hours that I managed to spend with him. My moral compass was all over the shop with this, mate. Do I record it? Do I not record it? So I decided to record it. Do I regret it now? Probably yes, because I can't look at those. I can't look at those pictures.
Yeah.
But it was something I felt very strongly about. The amount of times I've busted into people's lives and taken photos of their dead relatives, I just didn't think it was fair or appropriate for me to turn my back on, my dad. And the biggest story to this whole thing was dementia. I wanted people to know what it was like to lose someone that you loved and cared about, and someone that brought you into this world who didn't even recognize you anymore, didn't know your name, had no idea you had a son or a wife or daughters. And that's why I said it was literally, and it's even hard for me now to talk about it. It literally was the hardest assignment I've ever had to do.
Your sisters, one of the photographs in particular is one of your sisters lying on the bed with Dad. It's so powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, I asked her permission first. I said, look, I want to do this.
Yeah.
We've always been close. I've been very lucky with my parents and my siblings.
Yeah. Well, I'm very pleased you're coming back to talk some more with us on the Extra Mile edition today, the companion edition to this show. Thinking about your life and what you've done and how you got into it. From those early days in the fiberglass factory, sat around a table with some cups of tea, wondering what to do next with your life. What's your why? Why do you do this?
I do it because I believe in telling stories, mate. And the only way I can tell these stories is through my photographs. And it's about getting the stories out there and giving people a voice that don't have a voice. It's no different to what any other photographer's done over the last 100 years. We're all attracted to this medium of how we tell stories. And that's the driving force behind me. That's what gets me up in the morning, to go and to make pictures, because I'm lucky enough that, the hobby I had as a small boy is still giving me enough inspiration in my late 50s to still go out there and try and make pictures.
And my thanks today to Gary Ramage for talking with me on the photo walk. He is back for the Extra Mile. All right, Pups has found some more water, hey? Let's call this the swim walk today, not the photo walk. You going to shake? Go on then, have a shake. No, all right. Fair dues. Had a letter the other day. Oh, look, I've swallowed one. Oof, I'll talk about that in a second. From somebody who said Barney has gone from being so desperately quiet a month or two back to finding his voice again. Yes, he is. And he's in 5 fettle. I think it's something to do with the summertime. He's happy. Look, dancing around, enjoying the sunshine. I tried to get through, wanted to walk quickly along the path there. There's a particular part of the path which is critter-tastic, midges galore. And usually I end up eating a few, and it usually affects my voice, if I can say usually again, for the rest of the photo walk. So it does. I think I may. I think that little one that I thought I got away with, there's another one in there. Oh, it's a bit, well, it's not tenuous at all, actually. It might seem a bit obvious. It certainly wasn't planned. But that is one of the things I talk about with Thomas Nicolon next week, the French Nat Geo photographer. We talk about what happens when you empty out the rainforests or the forestry and you're left with just the insects. So I'm quite pleased to see them because we need them as part of our ecology system, don't we? And there have been times I've walked along here thinking, where's all the midges? How comes we've had no midges today? Gary returns for the extra mile, along with Graham Harries. Gary is back for 3 more stops. Questions that you've set too from our community in the extra mile, that is. And Graham is back to talk about a photo pilgrimage that I wonder whether I'll ever be able to take in my lifetime.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Obviously, you need to have an element of common sense because, if something did happen to you there, first of all, you've got to realise that you're in a foreign country and your health insurance will not cover you for that type of holiday, urban exploration on top of a disused tower block in the middle of a radioactive exclusion zone.
And especially as a freelance photographer now, I mean, that's the whole thing that I brought away from Ukraine with the whole thing about people not wanting to buy our content is, how else do we then survive in this age of technology? How do we still stay relevant? So I've got a couple of projects that I've now finished with that I'm trying to sell.
The extra mile fuels this show. Without it, I'll be honest, we would not be walking these paths of a Friday. Not because I don't want to. I'd happily be doing this for a decade plus. But because to date I have not won the lotto. So I'm leveling with you there. That your support, the extra mile support for the price of it can be for as little as the price of a coffee every single month. That helps grease the wheels of this show and keep us here walking week on week. It really does. So thank you to those who are extra milers or about to become one, which you can do through going to the photowalk.show page and following the Support the Show tab. That'll tell you all about it and what you need to do. And then you'll be part of our community, which gets the Extra Mile show, a show all of its own. It's not just a quick chat, it's a full production. It really is. It's like having another podcast. And from July, I'm going to run a short series for the month across the week called Reflections, where I reflect on my day-to-day as a podcaster. There's a barge going through, but we got such a lot of... these reeds now, you can't see through them along some of the path. It's there, as you can hear, but you can't see it, so no photograph. Reflections is where I reflect on my day-to-day as a podcaster, talk about the behind-the-scenes stuff, and offer up my own thoughts about photography. And I'm starting this week, actually, with a sample of what that's going to sound like. The show is called 3 Weddings and a Funeral, the extra mile this week. Haven't you got the title wrong there, Neil? No, but it's quite an interesting story, and it's the first of my reflections pieces, which will be only on the extra mile. And a quick nudge as well, monthly live Zoom meetups for extra milers in Vision. It's only a couple of weeks away, so you'll be a part of that as well if you join us. The PS to the show is still to come, but first we need a play-out song, a record to make a few final frames to, or think about what's been said today. I'm returning to a track by Pups Come Over, jogger coming past. Whoop, whoop, jogger. Morning. Don't think he liked my joke. Come on. I'm returning to a track by Ziv. Some people are in the sunshine. He's running. He's having a good time. Morning. No, nothing at all. I'm returning to a track by Ziv Moran called High Time because it certainly has it's got a feeling of reflection, which I think is important today considering what we've been talking about within our show. And I'll be back with a postscript in a moment.
I call to the mountain, sitting across the bay. Morning comes, oh, is steadier than yesterday. I'll take the stillness as a sign to write a song about things we've done and the things still to come. Flowers in the plenty, coloring in the view. Red sunburns late Sunday afternoon. Talking for hours about the places we have gone and things we've done and the things still to come. It's high time, high time, high time, high time. Trees with orange leaves, they take me to a place. To be by your side, I would run all night and day. Tall pines and fall lines, I'm glad that we are home. And time with you, I will never outgrow. 'Cause it's high time, high time, high time, high time.
That's High Time by Ziv Moran. A wonderful song. Fantastic. Should we do a final sketchbook, pups? Come on, let's do a final sketchbook picture along the path. Should do one of the shadows, shouldn't I? It was a bit cliche. It's not. Right. 640th, F8. Oh, look up through the trees here. Look through that leaf. I'll get the word in a minute. F8, so we can get a sunburst. Ooh, we're not really getting one. ISO 160. Here we go. I hope that'll work. A few mentions for those who smooth the voyage for us each week. My thanks sincerely to Neil Ford, who looks after IT and sends me, you won't know this, but he sends me constant reminders. He's brilliant. He's like a pop-up Neil Ford. That would be a bit strange, wouldn't it? Sitting there at my desk, pop up, hello, have you remembered? My thanks also to Andrea Gilpin, who keeps a watchful eye over Instagram, as does Kelly Mitchell, our Kelly for Facebook, and to Michael Mixon, who helps with show research. Write a postscript for the show. This week I've chosen Robert Frank, who was a Swiss-born photographer. I think he's Swiss-American, isn't he? Photographer, best known for The Americans, which was a truly groundbreaking body of work. Very raw body of work. A very unfiltered character of post-war America. It's one of my favourite pieces of work, favourite books, The Americans. We've talked much about humanity today, through the conversation with Gary Ramage, of course. So I thought this postscript was perfect for today. There is one thing the photograph must contain: the humanity of the moment.
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides. Thoughts can be cruel, they're not mine to hold. The space unravels when you let go.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.